All right, this is the McCracken County Fiscal Court meeting, June 22. Meeting to order. And Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Jones?
I'm here.
Commissioner Bartleman?
Here.
Commissioner Parker?
Here.
Judge Clymer?
Here. And Commissioner Bartleman, you offer a prayer, please.
Sure will. Father, we just thank you for the blessings of this day. We ask your blessings on our first responders, Father, be with them, all the police, firefighters, and ambulance workers and others who keep this community safe, Father, in this time and the things that are going on in the country. We're just so blessed to have dedicated people who do the job here in McCracken County and Paducah. We just pray you be with them as they continue to perform their duties. We pray for the other issues going on in the country, the COVID-19 virus and all the other issues. Father, we just pray you give peace to those and have those issues resolved in a positive way. Ask you to be with us in our meeting tonight, that we will make decisions that are best for the residents of McCracken County, and that we just do what needs to be done in your will. Father, it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right, now join me in stand and pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll just note for the record that we started at around 5:45. We've been repeatedly attempting to go live on YouTube and live stream as we gave notice, but we were unable to. Our other option was to be on channel 11. We are live on channel 11, I'm told, and so we will not be live on YouTube, but we will record the meeting, put it on YouTube. We'll also have put on the record for YouTube channel that anyone wishing to watch live can do so by going to channel 11 Comcast. Consent agenda.
It is ordered to approve the consent agenda for the June 22, 2020 McCracken County Fiscal Court.
So made.
Second, Bill Bartleman.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Budget transfer.
It is ordered that the necessary cash transfers in the amount of $1,488,000 be made in order to pay county bills and payroll approved June 22nd, 2020.
So made.
Second.
Second, Bill Bartleman.
And any discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed,
Aye.
no. That carries. Accounts payable.
It is ordered to approve the vouchers claim register from June 8th, 2020 to June 22nd, 2020 to show county bills in the amount of $1,071,324.54 were paid.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. And I just got a message back from Jack Kane at Channel 6. He says says I'm on Channel 11. So it's discussion items. We've got Bruce Wilcox with Greater Paducah Economic Development here to give us a report. Hello, Bruce. Glad for you to stay up late for us tonight.
Absolutely. Are we going to do our session in right now, or are we going to do it in closed session? I thought Deputy Judge Executive Doolittle and I talked about doing it in closed session. So,
well, we do have, of course, in closed session, we can only do the things that qualify for closed session. Are there any things we're trying to discuss that would not qualify, Commissioners or Mr. Doolittle?
Okay, I can share a few of the things with you. I was going to give you an update on the projects that we have pending that we're working and some of the new ones that have come on board. But I was also going to share with you about the projects that we've announced. I think it's no surprise to everyone that we announced Genova, the 125 jobs there. That was 80 jobs immediately, with the anticipation of ramping up to 125 jobs in the very near future. Part of that transaction involved an option for the new occupant, Plastic Services and Products, or KSR Legacy, to actually purchase the building. And we're working with them on the acquisition of that. And we're looking at that sale being consummated sometime during the first week of July. And the city and the county will actually have some nice equity proceeds once they receive the sales proceeds and pay off the bond issue on that, if that's what you so choose to do. We've also announced 15 new jobs with NRE, that's National Rail there. They had purchased the building in front of their larger existing facility, and they're putting in some sizable capital investments there, relocating some jobs from Hagerstown, Maryland, and going to be putting in some machining equipment, and a very nice sizable investment there for the community. And then we've also, last week, we announced Kaleo. We've been working on that transaction since the latter part of last year, November, December timeframe. And between the timeframe that we started working with Kaleo on that, they added 7 additional jobs from the time we started until we initiated the lease agreement. And I'm happy to share with you, from the time that we initiated the lease agreement up until their opening, they've added an additional 8 positions. So from the time this started up until it actually opened, there's 15 new positions there. They're currently sitting at about 65 employees for Paducah, with the anticipation of adding another 50 jobs in the very near future. So some good things there, right at almost 65 jobs there, 125 with Genova, 15 at National Rail. You're looking at upwards of right at 200 jobs here within the last 30 to 60 days. So very pleased. We've been very fortunate throughout this COVID process. We've been very busy. Things have actually started to slow down in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but we've worked a lot of projects. And we actually had a call through a referral with Commissioner Parker on a new prospect today. So we're working those, and I'll share more with those with you in the closed session, if that's okay.
Okay, and is there anything, we're going to have some discussions. I think I saw where there was some interest in discussing maybe some terms or changes to our agreement with GPED. That we would want to and can justifiably do those in executive session. But is there anything else, Commissioners, that you want to address in open session now as to what Bruce just told us, or anything else we talk about in open? I don't hear anything. So,
I'd just like to say, I want to thank Bruce and his staff. I know they've worked hard during this last few months, and the communication and response time has been outstanding. And it's obvious to me that you are doing the diligence that it takes to learn our economy. So thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with that. I'm with Bruce a fair amount, and Bruce is a strong partner with us, I think, with representing GPED, making a name for himself for this community.
Great job.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go on to 4B, Creighton County Jail vehicles. That involves the purchase of 2 pickup trucks back 2-3 weeks ago. We got there's Jailer Knight there. The use of the vehicles, I think, has evolved somewhat. David told me, Jailer Knight told me this other day, making some changes in the proposed use of them. And so the questions we have is about really centers around whether commissary money, which was used to purchase them, can legitimately be used, and whether those, I guess another issue is whether that contract can be made without fiscal court approval or joining in. So I don't. You want to lay the background on where we are right now with Jail Knight?
We, as I spoke with you the other day, we are strictly going to use these vehicles for work programs and/or vocational programs. They will be at the jail and not take-home vehicles. So that should fall well within the law of commissary funds.
That wasn't the original intent of these vehicles, though, was it?
It was the intent other than we were going to allow them to be taken home. Yes, they were still going to be used for transporting inmates. We have the cages ordered, the lights and everything that goes with them ordered. Yes, sir. I'm just not going to have them as take-home vehicles at all.
And what about the vans that you have?
That's something I would still like to discuss. We still have those vans. If you all would like to sell them, we can, and I can rearrange vehicles to replace those. I do have a problem with them being marked, especially in this environment that we're in. I feel it's a safety issue for the inmates as well as the staff that are driving them.
I personally think that every jail vehicle ought to be marked that it's a jail vehicle for the safety of the public, because the public needs to know if there's a vehicle somewhere, if there's inmates in it, they need to know that. I think your take-home
no disrespect
should be marked. Your pickup truck should be marked. Everything should have the jail.
No disrespect, Mr. Bartlin, but no disrespect, Commissioner Bartlin, but that would be a horrible idea when you're transporting a high-risk inmate. The last thing you want to do is let someone know that you're transporting an inmate.
I think that should be the first thing you want people to know.
Yeah, from a safety standpoint, it is not.
How about the safety of the public?
How is it any less safe with an unmarked vehicle than with a marked vehicle?
If that vehicle gets in a wreck or something goes on, people need to know who is in it.
And there's a much higher chance that's going to happen if it is marked, because somebody's going to intentionally cause that wreck to attempt to escape that inmate.
How many incidents have you had so far?
Me personally, I haven't had any.
How many have you heard nationwide where that's happened?
I'll be glad to gather that data for you if you'd like, but I've been through plenty of training where they tell you that is the highest likelihood of escape is in transport.
Are you going to mark the pickup trucks? Will they be marked? Will they have the jail logo on them?
No, sir, I won't.
I think they should. And I think the take-home Tahoes should have the jail logo on them too. Why don't they have a logo on them?
They don't need them. They are also used to transport inmates. I never intend to mark any jail vehicles.
I think that's wrong. I think that's more danger for the public than marking them. If you want to keep one that's unmarked to do high-risk inmates, fine, but.
Yep, I'll be glad to gather that data for you, but I respectfully disagree with you.
What does federal BOP do, and what does Department of Corrections do?
None of those are marked.
The Department of Corrections has
few.
buses they move people around on. They have Department of Corrections on the side of the bus. I used to see them on the West Kentucky Parkway all the time.
I'm not talking about buses. I'm talking about the ones that come in and out of our jail that are small vehicles like we use.
Do they have official license plates on them?
All of ours do, but two.
What are the two that don't, David?
The Durangos.
The Durangos you drive home, you don't have them on it.
No, sir.
What's the reason for that?
Again, I had to talk with the judge when we put those on there that we literally transport cartel individuals in these things. And it's not a good idea to have them marked in any way that they have an inmate in them.
Well, we've
It
got
hasn't been 3
also,
weeks ago we took. I'm sorry.
we also have Sam's memorandum concerning the transport of inmates in vehicles that are purchased for commissary funds. And you said a while ago, David, it's clear that you can spend commissary money for the transportation of inmates. However, the legal analysis provides just the opposite. And I know that there are, or I've been told, that there are jails that do purchase transportation vehicles with commissary funds. I know that ours has for many years, our jail has done that. However, Sam did a pretty detailed, very detailed analysis on that question and came to the conclusion that fiscal court budget money is to be used for the transportation of inmates, and that the commissary money is for the benefit and enhancement of the well-being of prisoners, for to enhance safety and security of the jail, but not for transportation of inmates. And so we've got
And that's why I called you the other day and told you I would amend my intentions of these vehicles to strictly work programs and recreational, such as welding and the programs I've started. That way we
I'm not hearing you, David.
Your sound is.
Can you hear me now?
I heard
Can
that.
you hear me?
Yeah.
Any better?
Yeah, you better now.
Okay. I said that's why I spoke with you the other day and agreed to amend what my original intent was to strictly recreational, such as the welding programs we have, or the work programs. Those would enhance or they'd be for the welfare of the inmate until we get a more guided legal direction from the Attorney General's office. It is my understanding that the Jailers Association are preparing paperwork to request an opinion on that. So we would have a definite direction to go. So we don't have one county doing one thing and one doing another.
How have you responded to the criticism in the audit of the Durangos?
Going off the previous year's audit, the previous year's auditor said we were completely in compliance as long as we had cages in them and transported inmates.
That's not what they said in this one, though. Are you keeping logs of the use of the vehicles?
No, we're not.
Didn't the auditor say you had to do that?
The private auditor did, or recommended.
I think we have an obligation to follow the direction of our auditor.
Our actual auditor's office, and we can do that.
This was done on behalf of the auditor's office.
I
We can't
understand.
ignore what the auditor says in our audit report.
I'm not ignoring what he says.
Pardon me?
I'm not ignoring what he says.
Then
I
but you're
disagree
not
with what
keeping
he
logs,
says.
are you? Are you keeping logs?
No, I am not.
Didn't he say in there you should keep a log? And the
He
county would have
recommended
to
we keep.
reimburse the commissary fund for mileage used that was not for transporting vehicles, like driving at
If we're going to
home.
go back, if we're going to go back and do that, we're going to have to go back about 15 years and do that with the vast majority of our vehicles.
Well, he just said it in this audit, so I think it needs to be done. We need to follow what the auditor tells us, or we're going to get in trouble again.
Okay, so if our next auditor says it's okay, then we could stop.
We have to follow what the auditor says.
Well, let's for the moment at least stick to what the law is, and I understand. I think what's being missed, and I'll ask Sam to explain better than I can, but there's a general statute, 441-135, that provides what David, you're saying, the commissary fund can be for two purposes: to benefit and to enhance the well-being of the prisoners, or to enhance safety and security within the jail. And so here we're talking about transporting prisoners for their benefit by teaching them a vocation. My belief initially was that perhaps that was justified. However, Sam in his brief points out that there are two specific statutes, because they are specific statutes as opposed to the general statutes in 441-135 that provide that the fiscal court shall provide for the incarceration of prisoners, and that's 441.025, and 441.505 says that the fiscal court of each county shall provide for the transportation of prisoners as necessary from the jail budget. And so those specific statutes, Sam's interpretation and mine as well, and an interpretation that I don't like to come to, but so the specific statute states that commissary money cannot be used for the transportation of inmates at all. Even I think Sam will tell us for any reason. And I know that that's been done, probably you're right, David, for 15 years. But there's what's been done and there's what should have been done. And so, Sam, let's get that squared away. If I say that correctly, Sam, anything else you want to expand on that?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about as well. Am I unmuted? I'm sorry. Okay. That's what I was thinking about as well, is whether David's modification of the utilization for the vehicles is going to make a difference on that. I wasn't aware that differentiation had been drawn. But where I am with it is that and I did a tremendous amount of research, man. I spent a lot of time on this, trying to figure out this transport thing. And from what I'm gathering, the individuals, the courts that weighed in on this used the word transport. They didn't use the word transport in relation to vocational activities or transport in relation to medical treatment and associated activities, court activities. It was transport only, and it wasn't qualified in any way. So I'm afraid what would happen here, based on what I've learned through the authorities, is that even though it's definitely a benefit to the inmate to utilize these programs, for their betterment, enhancement of their well-being, the transportation of the inmate to the location to learn the skills is still transport of an inmate, and still falls within the general rules, or actually the specific rules that these courts are laying out there for who funds transport. So I'm just not confident that it's going to clarify or rectify the issue that we got going on with it. At first, I was like, oh, we got something to work with, but then I'm just not confident on it, man.
Did you hear what I said earlier, that I spoke with the president of the Jailers Association, and they are preparing the paperwork to get to the Attorney General's office to get his opinion?
Did they allude to any statutes or opinions that they're currently relying on for their position?
They did not. But
They
I'll be glad to get together with you and we'll look at them. And of course, we want to make sure we're following what we're supposed to be doing. But I can tell you they're backing it up with something. I'll be glad to get it for you, and we'll also want to look at it. But the vast majority of the jails across the state use them for these purposes.
I actually reached out to the County Attorneys Association and to our president and our lobbyist there in Frankfurt that kind of handles the outreach and getting people's ideas on this stuff. I tendered a copy of my memorandum. I said, please, anybody, if you see a glaring mistake, if I'm wrong, please let me know. And I got word back that I was supposed to get a response, and that was a week ago, but I haven't gotten anything whatsoever. So I don't know if they support me or they think I'm a complete idiot on this and I'm way off base, or if they think I've really nailed it. But I would be surprised, given the amount of analysis I put into it and the amount of time that I've been dealing with these county governmental issues, I would be surprised to find out that my research was flawed. But doesn't mean I don't have an open mind to listen to what somebody else may be able to show me, as long as it says so-and-so versus so-and-so in a reported decision, or OAG X, Y, and Z number. Got to have something to get me there.
Sure.
It's reliable.
Yeah, I thought somewhere in the back of my mind, I remember reading a case, and I thought it was out of Lexington, Fayette County, where a true transport vehicle had been blessed by some court or attorney general, but I could be wrong. It seems that if you could justify the vehicle enhancing the safety and security, and David, you'll have to help me with that, is whether a vehicle could enhance safety and security while in transport, that might be the way to do it. All that being said, you and I have talked privately. You know my deeper concerns on this issue. You've established great programs for the benefit and the enhancement of the well-being of prisoners, and maybe we haven't, for our 16 viewers, we haven't explained what this money is. This is the canteen money. We call it canteen money and we call it commissary money. Same money, right?
Correct. It is the same.
How much money are we talking? Because this is money that's not in our budget, that we're not really, you're in charge of this money. You communicate to the treasurer this money. How much money a year is it?
On average, if we stay on the pace we're at, 350,000.
You know,
That's about doubled since I took office.
And I doubt Randy and Danny chime in to watch our meetings, but in the event they do, I'll point them to this time. This whole discussion demonstrates to me is that this statute, KRS 441-135, has been woefully inadequate for 25 years. I remember, I know that there's been lawsuits between the fiscal court in Fayette County and the jailer over how to spend commissary canteen money. And for the life of me, I don't know why the General Assembly can't take up creating some regulations so that we're not spending our time on a Monday night trying to figure out whether this is or isn't appropriate. This could be so much easier. But this money comes from the mothers and the daddies of those who are in the prison, and it's important to me that we focus those funds on improving their possibilities for a better future for them. And I guess I just have concerns over what appears to be a business habit of using these funds to buy vehicles. If we can somehow transform these vehicles into truly vehicles that are improving the lives and the well-being of the prisoners, then I'm okay with that. But I guess.
And that's what I'm attempting to do by changing exactly what I said I was going to do, strictly for work programs and vocational programs.
I say I'm okay with it. I don't know that I'm at the authority. I mean, it sounds like Sam's saying there's some legal problems with it. But I'm just saying personally, what would appease me is seeing this benefiting either their work program development, work ethic, something that's going to improve the potential for their success after their incarceration, which is what this money is designed. And it's the whole reason you get to collect this money.
Correct. Sam, will you let us know as soon as you hear from all your paper, all the work you've done, we get some kind of some kind of direction on this?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to need to obviously reach back out to them because from what I understood, it generated some interest, and I put it as an issue that will be generating a lot of interest through our various county jails because I'm quite certain this policy or this practice has been, just as David said, it's been the way it's been done for ever since anybody can remember, and it will cause some serious ripples if what I'm saying is absolutely correct. So there's interest out there, and there's folks looking at it. They hadn't hollered at me, but I'll get that. I'll reach back out and see what they can come up.
Let me ask this question. Sam, I've got your memorandum here, and this is not a public document. And I assume it's not a public document because it's attorney-client privilege and you're giving us attorney-client advice.
Right.
Which is our privilege to waive.
Right.
And I don't know that I saw anything in there I wouldn't want the public to read. And to the degree that it might help the public understand it, I would be in favor of waiving the privilege to make sure that there's complete transparency on this issue.
I believe that you gentlemen can do that collectively as the client. And just, when I forwarded mine, I simply cut and paste. I didn't put, nothing has been shared by me with any other individuals that was presented in the format of your attorney-client memo.
Well,
just so you know.
I'd be inclined to make that motion, but David, I don't want to surprise you with that motion. David, have you read the memo?
I have.
Well, I guess, well, in any event, I think the legal advice, I don't know, maybe a summary of the facts doesn't need to be, maybe we could redact that first two paragraphs of the summary of facts, but I think the legal opinion should be public and the public should have the ability of this legal analysis.
Well, I talked with Sam before the meeting and told him like you're saying, Commissioner Jones, I think this is a public interest, and I don't want to try to address it outside of the public eye. It is an interesting subject, and it's been about spending the public's money or using the commissary money. And so, what is your motion to make this memorandum public?
Yeah, I think that is my motion. I mean, everything in there has either been referenced in a public audit or it's Sam's opinion. So I would move to waive the privilege for Sam Clymer's legal memorandum dated June 6, 2020.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion about that? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, that carries. So we'll make that public.
I think we have another issue we need to deal with too. If we were to agree that the pickup trucks are for the purpose of helping the inmates, how about the take-home vehicles? How do you justify using commissary funds for drive-home Tahoes?
I think they're Durangos.
Durangos, I'm sorry.
That's something we can address. So I've got 9 vehicles over there that will need to be replaced.
You have 9 vehicles. How many are inmate? Are they all transport vehicles?
No, I have 11 vehicles. I have 9 of them that were bought with commissary funds.
How many of those vehicles are on the road at one time transporting inmates?
Depends on the day. Anywhere from none to 9. 2 of them are maintenance vehicles.
And you take them to
Those are not
doctors'
commissary.
offices, is that right? Mainly you take them to the doctors?
Primarily doctors, other jails, hospitals, federal courthouse.
Let me ask you this, David. Do you agree, David, that commissary money cannot be used for take-home vehicles?
Going off of Sam's opinion, yes, I would agree with it. Going off previous auditors, they had no issues with it.
But the last auditor did.
I didn't hear all what you said. What did you say again, David?
I said, going off of Sam's opinion, yes, sir. I agree with what you're saying. Going off previous auditors, we had no issues with it.
Okay, well, I think if everyone can agree, we'll see what the further legal analysis is. I do believe that, unfortunately, I believe from this analysis and these statute comparisons that the commissary money cannot even be used to transport vehicles for any purposes, given the wording of these statutes. But hopefully that's incorrect. I do believe, and I have great confidence that they cannot be used just for take-home vehicles. That neither increases the safety or the security within the jail, nor does it enhance the well-being of prisoners. And so I guess also if you have a vehicle that's being used for both take-home and for transporting a prisoner, perhaps, and I think that's where the auditor landed was, if it's going to be used for the benefit of the prisoners, then that use has to be logged and separated from just the take-home use of the vehicle. Is where the auditor landed on that. But we can come back to that. Maybe we'll have something further in our next meeting, if that's agreeable.
While we're waiting on some clarity from Sam on that, David, it might not be a bad idea to start keeping up with logs on your transport on these inmates, so we kind of got a picture of what we do need if we have to make some changes.
Okay. I'll get with the Jailers Association and see where they're at with the Attorney General's opinion, and we'll try to get this done as quickly as we can, so we're all on the same page with it.
So you're not going to follow the advice of the auditor, what the auditor said, and keep logs?
Mr. Bartleman, we have gone through this several times, and I'm not going to continue to rehash it.
So
We're
you're
going
not
to follow the advice.
auditor. I just want to reaffirm you're not going to follow what the auditor said to follow.
I didn't say that. I said we're going to get a clarification from the Attorney General, and we're going to follow what he says.
I think it'd be a good idea to keep a log until you get that clarification. So until there's some change.
Okay.
Well, so let me say this. I don't want to get in an argument back and forth, but the vehicles, no matter what funding they were purchased with, are county property, and the county has been instructed by the auditor that we have to keep a log. So, David, I'll ask you to keep a log on those vehicles as to the use, so that at least until we find out where we are, and that way we can work toward maybe a good solution toward this.
Okay.
All right,
David, I want to reiterate a comment that Commissioner Jones made. And I'm sorry that we have a disagreement on this issue, but you're doing a good job over the jail and your vocational programs. You did a good job of keeping the COVID-19 virus out of the jail. You're doing a good job over there on a lot of other issues. And the vehicles was a controversial purchase a year ago when you bought the other vehicles, and I was kind of disappointed that it arose again after the controversy over the previous vehicles. But having said all that, you are doing a good job over there on vocational training and keeping the jail as quiet as you can keep a jail.
All right, so on to 4C, the name of the Pratt County Park. Who's taking that? Is that you, Steve?
Yes. So with the advent of the bridge that is in the factory being constructed right now, and I've been advised that the contractor will be mobilizing to begin prep work for the setting the bridge in July. We started from the proposition that we need some signage when people come across the river. So Mr. Irvin has been working on this.
You mean Creek, right?
I mean the creek, yes, Perkins Creek. And can everyone see that?
Yes, sir.
Here, I can make it probably a little bit bigger. And
You made it smaller.
I ended up making it smaller.
Yeah.
How's that?
That's bigger.
Does that look better? All right, so the bridge is going in roughly this location right here, and we thought, well, gosh, we need a sign there, and we began to realize that this entire area has lots of different things going on in it, from the mountain bike skills course, the soccer complex, to the pump track over here, to the model air park, but without really any context or signage. And while we do have some people, I go here fairly often, we have a number of people using this. We think when this connection gets made to the Greenway Trail, it's really going to open it up. So that, combined with, sort of the current reference to the dump site seemed a little inappropriate. So for the purpose of signage and helping people identify where they were, we started thinking about a name for this that is better than calling it the dump. And so one of the options that, just for the purpose of this graphic, we thought we would suggest was, well, perhaps we should call this entire area the Perkins Creek Park, and we would take. Do you see this now? The change to the sign of what that might look like, so that when people entered any one of these areas, they would see the signage and know what where they're at, what else is available in that area, and give them some sort of context to the whole thing.
So you need a motion to name the park.
That would be nice.
You're looking for that decision tonight?
Not necessarily, no, but in probably a month, 30 to 45 days, this bridge will be open, and we will be eager to put up some signage.
Well,
we're open to suggestions.
I've been giving this some thought, and I can't come up with a better name for the park than Perkins Creek Park either. I think it does fit and describe it well, and I would be comfortable with that name.
I've not really given it a lot of thought myself. I've been very busy with some other things, but I think maybe we ought to consider also, and it's like we heard from the sports tourism people, naming rights on property, whether it's land or buildings or whatever, is worth considering. And there might be somebody out there that would be willing to have their name put on that park and in return pay $50,000 or so much money per year or something like that. If we're not in a rush, maybe we would consider that possibility. Maybe it'd be Jeff Parker Park, and he'd send us, $250,000, and everybody'd be happy.
So Steve, your proposal is to name the entire complex Perkins Creek Park, and then I guess if we wanted to, we could name the individual areas in there or something else. We could sell the naming rights for those, like the Barclay Airport model airplane park, or we could sell the naming rights for the other things, right?
I think that's a possibility. That's a good idea. I mean, we done that at the high school years ago, and done quite well with it. So we might talk about that. I think there's some possibilities there. I went to the model airplane show, by the way, and that was kind of intriguing. I enjoyed that.
Well, you know, when we do our soccer complex, whenever we land on that, I think it's going to have a huge potential for naming rights there. And I don't know why we wouldn't at least consider, you know, a lot of our properties for sports purposes, possibly generating some money off of them. I don't know who Perkins is of Perkins Creek, but you know, we certainly could use some finances.
Well, okay, then we wait.
Any other discussion on that? We can circle back around on it next time.
It's always worth noting to me that the Central Park in New York City 200 years ago was also a landfill. So who knows? All we need is a couple hundred years.
Some would say it still is.
No, it's a great park.
All right, we're ready to go on to court orders then. A,
It is ordered that the contract between the McCracken County Jail and Mid-America Health, Inc. for dental services performed by Mid-America Health, Inc. to inmates at McCracken County Jail be approved.
So moved.
I will second that for some discussion. Didn't we have some discussion from last meeting on that?
leave it dead. Go ahead with the discussion then.
David, what we asked some questions last meeting. I don't think you're on here. Can you tell us more about the program or what these people do for us?
These are a contracted dentist that comes in once a month. They do only pull teeth, which is really what our minimum requirement is for doing that. We do have to legally provide dental services and medical services to inmates. We can't find a local dentist willing to do that, so we have to contract with this company to do it. The company has been contracted with them for at least 8 years that I've been around there. So this is not a new contract. It's already in the budget.
How many do they do when they're on average? They come in here and we pay them, what was it, $2,200 or something like that? How many they pull that in an average day?
On an average, I would say 20.
I'd say
it would be cheaper to contract with a local one, but you can't find any willing to do it. They're just not
I
going
talked
to.
to local and they were $200 to $250 a piece. So if they're doing 15 or 20, we're coming out way ahead.
Yes.
Do you, Jalen Knight, do you put out a request for this work?
For this contract?
Yeah, I get it.
No, this has been an existing contract since long before I took over. This is just a renewal of it. So no, it has not been rebid. We have actually called around and asked dentists to do it, but they're just not interested.
And so this contract will expire next week?
If it's my understanding, it's already expired. They've just been continuing on anyway as if the contract was there.
This says it's from December 2019 to November 2020.
Okay.
So it's already,
it was
it's already under, even though we haven't approved it.
So you'll have an opportunity to relook at November. Well, I'm okay.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed, no. All right, that carries. B,
It is ordered that the McCracken County Road Department participated in the June 10th, 2020 Kentucky Association of Counties Reverse Salt Auction. Bids were received from Compass Minerals America, Inc., Cargill De-icing Technology, Detroit Salt Company, and Magic Salt. 700 tons was specified for the contract, and the bid amounts were Compass Minerals America, Inc., $72.30, Cargill De-icing Technology, $72.70, Detroit Salt Company, $99.50, and Magic Salt, $119. All 4 bids were taken under advisement.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? I like the sound of magic salt, but I'm not sure what it is. But anyway, so all in favor, aye. Opposed, no.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that carries. C.
It is ordered that the bid for the road salt for the term of July 1, 2020 through March 31, 2021 be awarded to Compass Minerals America, Inc. for $72.30 per ton.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 68.005, the McCracken County Administrative Code has been reviewed and is hereby adopted by the majority of the McCracken County Fiscal Court at this meeting held on June 22nd, 2020.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion?
Steve, there's no changes in it, is it? It's just a formality, right?
Statute requires an annual review. We, as you know, we make changes from time to time, but we do those by ordinance. We have some in the pipeline that we should see probably introduced in July.
Thank you.
But no changes in the current version.
Right, it's just a formality.
All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that the judge executive is authorized to sign the service agreement with GPEDC to pay the amount of $250,000 to GPEDC for fiscal year 20 to 21.
So made.
I'll second for discussion.
All right, discussion?
Well, I think we're close, but I sent around an extra section today regarding elections of the board members and I guess addressing a commissioner presence on the investor council as non-voting members. I think you guys saw that. I don't think section 10 is, as it was written earlier today, is quite ready for GPED's acceptance and probably needs more work.
So what are you proposing that we do?
I think I don't want to go through what we went through last year, but since we're not quite ready, hopefully we'll be ready at our next regular meeting. I would move that we table this contract and work on section 10.
Second.
Well, let me just say, and I understand, and I did read and gave some thought to it. I think that I would be prepared to sign off on this thing. I believe we tend to. I guess it's because there's so much involved, frankly, in running this county, and so many ins and outs, so many things that have to be done and researched and looked into. My viewpoint is that we've got a good designee in GPED, got a good CEO and Bruce running the show over there with a good board, Mr. Council. I don't like the idea of getting down into the weeds and requiring other things in order for us to pay them. But if you gentlemen disagree, certainly we'll do whatever you think needs to be done.
Well, and I don't like disagreeing with you, Judge, but on this issue, we kind of disagreed some last year, and I'll have to disagree with you a little bit on this year. You know, we have moved over the last, since our term, we have moved, when we took office, when we were elected, PED, as it was called then had a board of over 30 members. It was difficult to keep track who they were. They and us wanted it to be smaller. It's now 10. And the majority of the funding of the budget is overwhelmingly still public dollars. So the board is made up of 8 private individuals selected by the investor council and 2 public officials, you and the mayor serve. I think it just always surprises people when I talk to people who, and there are some who have an interest in this topic, to find out, commissioners run there. We've got an election tomorrow, and a lot of people are making their decision. Well, who's going to help? Which commissioner is going to help bring economic development? And then they get elected and they realize they're not even invited to the investor council. Now, we've made great improvements on that. The GPED has heard our collective whines or complaints or criticisms or suggestions. Pick your one, whichever one you want. And they've created a new committee, and that committee is working well. But I believe when I look at our duties under KRS Chapter 67, and given the fact that the public legitimately thinks that their county commissioners are involved in economic development, it almost doesn't make sense for us to say we're going to be one of the largest, if not the largest, investor in the Economic Development Council, but only one of us can go to the investor council. It makes sense on the board. I still think more on the board, but all right, I've lost that fight last year. Now I'm just trying to get to the investor council meeting. I find it ironic that I suspect if a private company was an investor and they wanted to take a guest, they probably could, but county commissioners can't get in the door, and that doesn't make sense to me. Now, that doesn't mean that anyone's being bad. It just means that we're in the process of evolving and creating a new business model and plan with our Economic Development Council. And frankly, I didn't think about it last year, and I've thought about it in the year since. And I think this is a change we need to make.
I agree with that, because right now, if a private investor donates $1,500, they're allowed to go to the investors meeting, and we donate $250,000, and we can only send one. And I think we ought to be able to sit in and listen and be a part of that.
Well, there's a reason there's a judge executive. And there's a reason that we speak with one voice. We've had that argument, that discussion, I'll call it. But you can be in the meeting by paying $1,000, just like everybody else that does. But I just have, I guess, a philosophical or theoretical objection to getting down and call it micromanaging, but managing to a further degree our partners in our economic development. I just think that we, as the county, we discuss what we want to do. If there's anything that is of a concern to the fiscal court, the commissioners, then you tell me, I go to the board, tell them we've got the heartburn over this issue or that issue. But, I just tend to think that sometimes we try to manage at a more particular level than we need to on these things. But any other discussion?
Well, just to make sure the public is clear, I mean, we're talking about probably a meeting that only occurs once a year, maybe twice a year, and it's where they elect their board of directors. It's where they announce their budget, And it's certainly not the room where they have super secret discussions because they don't have the agreements with all of the investors to have those secret discussions. We're not talking about crashing the board of directors meeting. We're talking about, I guess this is analogous to, do we get to go to the church meeting to watch the church vote on the deacons? We're not trying to get to the deacon board meeting. We're trying to get to the church meeting. And it just seems surprising that we couldn't get to the church meeting to see them vote on the deacons.
And so your motion then is to table it to the next meeting or what?
Table it and see, because I think that Bruce and I talked earlier today, and we were in agreement on lots of the other language, because part of what we're doing is making sure that they actually are, that the board of directors seats are not permanent seats, that they need to have election, and they've had to kind of put that off because of the virus, but we're giving them some timelines to have that elections to make sure that they're compliant with their bylaws. So we'll
I thought the election was in December. Is that not right?
They have two. I think their officers were elected in December.
If I may.
Sure.
Sure. The way the bylaws are written, there are two seats, two board of directors seats that are vacant, that are up for renewal effective July 1. And the election was scheduled to have been held back in March, April timeframe. And with the COVID-19 restrictions on being able to gather in large groups, the original intent was for nominations to be fielded from the floor, from the investor pool, and then an election held that way. So the board of directors made the decision to defer the election of the officers until October of this year, which that communication was sent out to all of the investors. So that's the plan for the two board seats that are up for vote. Commissioner Jones and I also discussed the officers, and I think that's what there might be the confusion with the December timeframe. We operate on a fiscal year, July to June, and the officers were appointed by the board, and the Secretary of Treasurer position was appointed by the chair. Those positions follow the tenure of the people appointed, and those positions are not up until fiscal year 2021. So at this point, the only elections that will be happening are for the two seats that are up for renewal. The officer positions will stay intact.
Okay, so I guess I don't, Commissioner Jones, is it that, so the two seats on the chair, on the board have been deferred for election in October. What's the holding of the payment of the money would be to wait to see that they do that, or what exactly is the give and take?
Oh, I don't think anyone's suggesting that we hold money. And in fact, the order that is as it's written kind of is inconsistent. As that order is inconsistent with our contract, because essentially, that order would say you could write a check for $250,000. I think even when we come back to this, the order just needs to simply say that you're authorized to sign the contract. The contract then says there's quarterly payments, and with each quarterly payment, there'll be a public report. But I did add a section which kind of, I guess, reminded everybody we got to have an election of the board of directors. And I think Bruce and his crew are on top of that. And then I added the section where the county commissioners get to go to the investor council. And that's where we're having a little bit of disagreement, but maybe we'll get it all worked out in the next 2 weeks.
All right, any other discussion? So the motion is to table this till next meeting. Is that right, Commissioner Jones?
It is, Judge. Almost called you Your Honor. Yes, Judge.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. I'm a no. The motion carries. F,
It is ordered, excuse me, it is ordered to pay the poll workers and absentee counters for the June 23rd, 2020 primary election.
So made.
Second.
any discussion?
Steve, can we get any money for this from the COVID fund? You're muted, Steve.
No, we can't. That question has come up with DLG, and it said it could not be used for elections. We did receive some financial assistance to hire extra people. And actually, we're really not going to have that great of an expense because ordinarily there's 54 precincts open with multiple poll workers, at least 2 or more per precinct. So we're just down to a handful of folks that are hired extra, for which we got assistance money from the state.
So we can't use that money for example, it's open till the voting's been open like on Saturday, and if there was overtime on Saturday, we can't get money for that.
No. Not that I have not heard a source for that. There was a meeting or a webinar that DLG and Keiko put on, and there were a few things they noted that you could not get any reimbursement for, and election costs was one of those. We did, however, receive some assistance from the state with this election to hire extra people, but unlike other years, we don't have that many poll workers.
I think I was in on that webinar. I think what they said was they're waiting to see if there was COVID funding to cover elections. They thought there might be. If there wasn't, they would take another look at that. Is that how you heard what they said?
Yeah. So what I heard is not at this time.
Right. So it could be, but okay. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter right now. Okay. Thank you.
All right, all in favor, aye. Opposed, no.
Aye.
All right, that carries.
It is ordered that an annual standing order be approved for the pre-approval of recurring expenses for utilities, payroll, debt service, vehicle fuel, and employee health benefit bills for fiscal year 2020-21.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
What's this do?
So on an annual basis, we have standing orders to pay things that come up more frequently, and on cycles that don't really fall with fiscal court, like utility payments and certain other things as it relates to, like, for example, we don't run payroll through the fiscal court.
Okay.
We run the budget through the fiscal court, but you don't see the actual checks we write to the employees.
Okay.
Sorry. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered to record the employee claims from April 29, 2020 to June 16, 2020 in the amount of $17,045.89 for HRS FSA transactions.
So made.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. That carries.
Ready for board appointments? It is ordered that John Lovelace is appointed to the Concord Fire District Board to serve from July 1, 2020 until the expiration of his 3-year term on June 30th, 2023, subject to further orders of the court.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that Tim Cahill is appointed to the PADD Transportation Committee to complete the term of William Miller, which term expires on June 30th, 2021, subject to further orders of the court.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
Ordinances. It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 67, that the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2020-6 shall be conducted in summary format as follows. McCracken County, Kentucky, McCracken County Fiscal Court, ordinance number 2020-6, and ordinance amending McCracken County ordinance number 2015-9 by making revisions to the provisions pertaining to site plans contained in section 51 and the provisions pertaining to storm water management facilities design criteria in section 65. Summary. The action effectuated in the present ordinance is authorized and required by Kentucky Revised Statutes, Chapter 100, and operates to amend the McCracken County zoning ordinance regulations contained in Article 5, Section 51 by specifying the administrative approvals of a properly composed and submitted site plan as conditions precedent to issuance of a building permit and the administrative review available should a site plan be denied. Further, the present ordinance operates to amend the McCracken County zoning ordinance regulations contained in Article 6, Section 65 by limiting the maximum depth of water held in a storm water detention basin located in a parking lot to not more than 6 inches. Certification. It is hereby certified by the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate official statement of the main points of and contents of ordinance number 2020-6, public inspection. A true and correct copy of ordinance number 2020-6 shall be made available for public inspection in its whole and complete form by the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office. Any person desiring to inspect ordinance number 2020-6 shall contact the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office via telephone at 270-444-4707 to make arrangements for the transmission or delivery of the same.
So made.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 67, the first reading of ordinance number 2020-7 shall be conducted in summary format as follows. McCracken County, Kentucky, McCracken County Fiscal Court, ordinance number 2020-7, and ordinance amending McCracken County ordinance number 2015-9 by repealing Article 7, Section 74 in its entirety and enacting a new version of Article 7, Section 74, providing specific procedures and requirements related to zoning map and zoning ordinance amendment, along with specific procedures and requirements for the use of development plans. Summary. The action effectuated in the present ordinance is authorized by Kentucky Revised Statutes, Chapter 100, and operates to amend the McCracken County zoning ordinance regulations contained in Article 7, Section 74 by repealing the previously existing version of said section and contemporaneously enacting a new version of Article 7, Section 74, containing revised provisions specifying the procedures and requirements relating to the amendment of the McCracken County zoning map, McCracken County zoning ordinance, as well as specifying the procedures and requirements for the use of the various types of development plans. Certification. It is hereby certified by the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate official statement of the main points of and contents of ordinance number 2020-7. Public inspection. A true and correct copy of ordinance number 2020-7 shall be made available for public inspection in its whole and complete form by the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office. Any person desiring to inspect ordinance number 2020-7 shall contact the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office by telephone at 270-444-4707 to make arrangements for the transmission or delivery of the same.
So move.
Second.
All right, somebody has I don't know, some background noise, TV or radio or somebody talking or something. If you can take care of that, please. And so Sam advises that we need to have a brief legislative fact hearing is I think the legal term for it. We've got Sonny Smith here with the Planning Commission, who, as I understand it, the Planning Commission opposes the ordinance change, and Mr. Doolittle wants to speak in favor of the ordinance change.
Judge, which one of us do you want to go first?
Well, it's I would think that the person opposing it go first. Is that good with you, Mr. Smith?
All right, sure. Thank you, Judge. Members of the Fiscal Court, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to come and speak to you about the proposed ordinance. I have several issues concerning the proposed changes in their current form. And for the reasons that I'm about to outline for you, those are the same reasons that the Planning Commission chose not to recommend adoption of these amendments. Basically, my objections are threefold. First, deals with the concept and design of the amendment. Secondly, deals with the organization and the structure of the proposed amendment. And then finally, deals with the text and drafting, the actual verbiage that's used within the ordinance is my third basis for objection. Dealing first with the concept of what we're dealing with, this is a section of the ordinance that is very important in zoning, and it's something that needs to certainly be correct. And part of the problem that we have right now with the current Chapter 74 in our zoning ordinance would continue under the proposed amendment, because there is a blending of the concepts between zoning amendments, where you're actually making a change in the zoning classification of a piece of property, and development plans. Chapter 74 currently deals with both amending the zoning map, and also deals with development plans. And I think those are two distinct concepts. They should be dealt with separately in separate sections of the ordinance. The development plans are required under the current Chapter 74 for zoning map amendments, but they're also used for other developments that do not require a change in the zoning classification of a piece of property. And it's my opinion that the details of the development plan and how the development plan can be modified should be the focus of a separate section of the ordinance dealing with development plans. When discussion began about changing Chapter 74, that was my proposal. And in fact, I drafted two sections of the ordinance. One was Chapter 74, dealing with amendments of the zoning map, and then the second section was a newly created section that would deal with development plans. And those two proposals never got off the ground. They were rejected by someone with the county and never got presented to the Planning Commission. The second area where I have issues with this particular ordinance is that the format is entirely incompatible with the rest of the zoning ordinance. When you look at it, the very first heading starts with a lowercase a, whereas the other sections in the zoning ordinance use more standard outline format beginning with the Roman numeral 1. That may not seem all that significant when you consider that in isolation, but I would encourage you to look at the ordinance itself and read through it and read through the flow of it. And there's no consistency in how subparagraphs are defined within the ordinance. And it's very confusing, and it's just totally different from all the rest of the chapters in the zoning ordinance completely. I can point you to some specific examples. Do you all have a copy of the ordinance in front of you?
I do, yes.
If you look at page 2.
Let me make sure I do. So I see, I've got the ordinance, but then I have an Exhibit A reference in the ordinance, and I'm not sure I have Exhibit A. I don't know if I don't have it because
there's no exhibit referenced in this ordinance. This is section 74.
I've got section 74. What I'm supposed to be looking at is a 3-page ordinance.
No, this is actually about 8 pages.
Anybody else got the 8-page?
No, mine's 3 pages. It's 2020-6, right?
No.
Sonny, you may be on a different, you may be on the other change.
The ordinance before on the floor is 2020-7, I believe.
Which deals with section 74, I thought.
Yeah, I've got 20-07 and it's 3 pages. And it's got 8 sections. But there's not an A in it.
Well, that's a different ordinance. I don't know. I asked to be provided with a copy of the ordinance that was delivered to the fiscal court, and this is what I received. So we would all be looking at the same document.
I just emailed to everyone the document that Sonny's referring to.
The one in our packet then wasn't right?
The one that would be Appendix A.
Okay. Sonny, I now have the 8-page.
Well, I can walk you through, if you go to the second page and look down near the bottom, there's a section F that refers to development plan requirements, and then below that there's a section 1, and then below that there's a subsection A. But there's no clear demarcation that is, you know, unless you're looking at this on paper, there's no clear demarcation that A is a subcategory of 1, which is a subcategory of F. You know, if you were writing that out, you would want A to be enclosed in parentheses or brackets or in some manner delineated as being distinguishable from the two headings above it. Same situation is on page 3. Same situation is on page 4. Page 5, if you can go to page 5 and look at it, section 5 that says zoning map amendment procedure. Well, the very next paragraph below that, that I suppose is supposed to be a sub-paragraph, is also has a number instead of a letter. You know, so you've got 5.1 under the zoning map amendment procedure. Same situation is on page 6 with category H that deals with amendments to development plans. It goes H1 and then A, and then again, A is not distinguishable from H in any manner. Same is true on page 7. I just point those out because, you know, normally when you're reading through a document that's in sort of an outline format, the outline follows a sequence of the way headings are set out. And that's inconsistent. Well, it's inconsistent overall with the rest of the zoning ordinance, but this is just, you know, in my opinion, you know, it's just poor draftsmanship to have an outline that's not really an outline. Another thing about, you know, the overall organization of this ordinance is the first 5 pages have fairly decent margins around the edge. But when you get to page 6, 7, and 8, you'll see that there's virtually no margin on the left-hand side of the paper. And, you know, that kind of thing to me reflects poorly upon the Planning Commission, who is dealing with this ordinance, you know, regularly, and it reflects poorly on the county to have something in its ordinance books that is so inconsistent and just lacks organizational forethought, in my opinion. The third area, and probably the most troubling, is the actual text and the drafting of the ordinance. And again, I'm just going to kind of have to walk you through and tell you where the problems are as I see them. Very first page, letter A, describes the intent. There's a statement 3 lines up from the bottom of that introductory paragraph that begins: the Planning Commission, in its obligation to promote the public health, safety, and general well-being, shall consider, but not be limited to, and then it lists 8 factors. I've been representing the McCracken County Planning Commission for the last 5 years. They've never considered those 8 factors, and it's not statutory. That's not what you're supposed to consider when you look at KRS Chapter 100. If you look at 100-2.211, it has about 4 factors to consider, and these are not those factors. So this really puts an obligation on the Planning Commission to consider more than what the law requires, and more than anything that the Planning Commission has ever considered since I've been representing it. Down near the bottom of page 1, beginning with the last sentence at the bottom of page 1, says the Planning Commission shall send copies of the notice to adjoining property owners surrounding the proposed zoning. Bottom of page 1.
Okay.
Last sentence, Planning Commission shall send copies of the notice to adjoining property owners surrounding the proposed zoning change within 200 feet of the property proposed for a map amendment. Well, the law requires you to send notice to owners of adjoining property. I would think that adjoining property is going to be within 200 feet. I don't really know. There's nothing about 200 feet in the statute. Statute says notice to owners of adjoining property, and a 200-foot circumference is not mentioned anywhere in the statute. Also on page 2, in that paragraph D that says findings required for granting amendment, There are 2 subparagraphs below that. There's a 1 and a 2, and those incorrectly state the law. There is a section in KRS 100 that does have 2 conditions that are to be considered, but instead of reading the way it reads now for number 1, where it says that the existing zoning classification given to the property is inappropriate, the statute does not say or improper. It says that the existing zoning classification given to the property is inappropriate and the property zoning classification, the proposed zoning classification is appropriate. In section 2.
So D1 and 2 basically work together. They just don't, they aren't compliant with the KRS.
That's right, chapter 100.211.
Well, aren't we allowed to be more restrictive though? I mean, can't we say 200 feet rather than just adjoining? Don't we have the authority to do that?
Well, but that's not what this says, Commissioner. It says notice to adjoining property owners surrounding the proposed zoning change within 200 feet. Well, if a property adjoins a property that's being rezoned, it's going to be within 200 feet. It's a redundancy. It shouldn't be there. It's, you know, it's confusing. Why is it there? Because adjoining property is, I mean, it's 0 feet. It's attached, part of it. Let's see. Okay, if you'll go to page 3.
Let's stop you there. So D2,
I'm sorry.
D2, I'm looking at section D2. Is that consistent with KRS or is it just D1?
Well, D2 is not, because it has, and that the proposed zoning classification is appropriate. It does have that, but that really belongs in 1. You know, if you're going to use the statute, then use the statute as it's written.
Right.
Opinion. That's what I would do. On page 3, section 2B, well, that is not really consistent with the way things are done right now with the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission really does not favorably recommend a map improvement to the fiscal court. The Planning Commission approves the map amendment, and then it lays over for 21 days for someone to ask if they want the fiscal court to make the final decision. So it's not necessarily a recommendation to the fiscal court at that point. So that's really not consistent with our practice, what it has been, or really what is envisioned under the statute.
2B, preliminary development. Okay.
Well, and there again, that's part of the problem with the way this is written, because it's talking about a preliminary development plan, but in the text of that section, it's talking about what the map amendment. So it's, you know, you're talking about 2 different things in that section. If you flip on over to page 5, section 2, under formal applications, says to formally request the commission to consider action on any zone map amendment and or preliminary development plan. And then it continues. And then down at the bottom, the last sentence says, also the date for the public hearing will be set. So here we're talking about 2 alternative proposals. One is for a map amendment, which requires a public hearing. And the other alternative is to request approval of a preliminary development plan. That does not require a public hearing. Nevertheless, the last sentence of this section says, also the date for the public hearing will be set. So that's inconsistent with what the requirements are. You don't have to have a public hearing for a preliminary development plan or for any development plan. Page 5, section 3 is confusing. I don't know what it means. I've read it multiple times. It says, upon reenacted amendment proposals, the applicant must wait 1 year before reapplying with the same proposal unless the Planning Commission grants permission to resubmit sooner. I don't know what a reenacted amendment proposal is. I'm just not familiar with that terminology. So I don't know what section 3 means. Page 5, section 4.
That's the review.
This is talking about, I'm sorry.
That's the one that says review?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does say review. Really, my problem with this one is not so much a legal problem as it is a practical problem. When you read, it's talking about having a meeting to discuss a development plan and meeting with developers, and you get your planning and zoning administrator to meet with somebody that's proposing a development in the county. The last sentence, though, says this meeting will be open to all interested parties, including the public. And I'm not sure that's an appropriate place to invite the public whenever you're having preliminary discussions about a development plan or a proposal for what someone's wanting to put on a piece of property. Also on that same page, section 6, subparagraph D talks about postponement. And it says, near the end, it's talking about in circumstances where further resolution is required, the commissioner may act to postpone final action on the development plan until further information or resolution of conflicts can be ascertained in accordance with KRS 100.211. 100.211 doesn't deal with development plans at all. It's strictly dealing with zoning amendments. And so the postponement, the section of the statute that's referenced there is inappropriate. If you go to page 6, section A3, so this is the beginning of a point in the ordinance where there are numerous references to the county, but it doesn't designate an individual employed by the county that's supposed to perform these functions. It says, where appropriate, the review agencies may assess the document and forward their comments to the county prior to final development plan approval. It should designate somebody, a position at the county, should be the planning and zoning administrator, but it doesn't say that. But it should, if that's what the intention is.
It's 7A3. Anyone else think?
Yes, that's correct.
Have you got all these written down in a piece of paper?
Yes, sir.
I'll make sure I'm taking notes, but
Okay.
I'd like to have a fallback too.
Yeah, I'll be happy to send these to you.
If
Okay,
you send
we're
it
on
to all of
page.
us, that would be good.
I'm sorry?
If you send it to all of us, it would be good, so we can review it afterward.
Okay, yeah, I'll be happy to do it. My notes are pretty cryptic, but all I've got is page numbers and just a little blurb about what the issue is, but I'm happy to share that with you. Okay, let's see, on page 6, section H, amendments to development plans. All right, it says development plans can only be amended after a public hearing. Public hearing is not required to adopt a development plan. So I don't think you should have a public hearing or require a public hearing to amend a development plan. And again, in some case, there's another generic reference to the county in the next to last line of section H. Okay, if you go to page 7 now, it's going to take a little.
Let me write amendment development plan, not public. Okay. Page 8.
Page 7. 2A, B, and C all have that same generic reference to county or county staff without referring to the title of the individual at the county that's, needed to take that action or needed to receive information from the public. Again, that's really a drafting thing. It's nothing legal about it, but it leaves it open-ended. If you're going to say that the county is going to review the plan, I think the public should know who it is at the county that's going to be reviewing the plan. And if you're supposed to file something with the county, then you need to know which office to file it at instead of just dropping it off at the courthouse. Under certification, it talks about county staff should have copies of the plan prepared and distributed to other public agencies. Again, it's just a generic reference to county staff rather than, planning administrator, zoning administrator, whoever the officer is responsible for those functions. And then the last text issue is another 2 references in paragraph 3 on page 8 under substitution of plans. There's a generic reference to county on the next to last line in 2 different sentences. Then I also noticed.
There you think we ought to have a designated person?
I do. And then also, I noticed that this goes to the organizational issue again. You see that number of substitution of plans is number 3. And if you look back on page 7, there's already a number 3 on page 7 that talks about content and format of minor amendments.
I get your point.
So, those are the major issues. Some may seem technical and, inconsequential, but I think when you look at the whole context of the proposed amendment, and when you look at the current Section 74, I'm not saying that the current Section 74 is ideal. It's not. It needs change, but this is not the change that it needs. It needs to be broken up. It needs to be divided into 2 different sections, one dealing with amendments to the zoning map and another dealing with development plans, so that you understand when you're reading through Chapter 70, Section 74 of the ordinance, what you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with a zone map amendment or if you're dealing with a development plan only. And it would certainly make it a lot easier to read and understand and comprehend what it is that the Planning Commission is working on. Every time we have a matter come up, whether it's a proposal to amend the zoning map or a proposal for a development plan, you have to wade through 8 pages of material like this and decipher which of those sections apply to what you're dealing with, whether you're dealing with the map amendment or whether you're dealing with the development plan. And I think it would just be much easier fundamentally if those 2 are separated into their own parts. As I said, these amendments were presented during a public hearing before the Planning Commission On February 26th of this year, I informed the Planning Commission at that time that I had reservations. So they tabled the amendments for me to review and comment at the next meeting. We did not meet in March. We met for the next time on April 22nd when I informed the Planning Commission of the same concerns that I just outlined for you here today. And the Planning Commission voted unanimously to deny the proposed amendments of Chapter 74 in their current form, and I respectfully submit that you should do the same. Thank you. Not, I'm happy to take any questions.
Sonny, it sounds like there's a win-win here. It sounds like you agree that we need some changes, and if we get the content right, you and the Planning Commission would be for it. Am I reading that right?
Well, that's true, sure. I think so, and I think I can get it to the point where the Planning Commission will agree with what I propose, and I would like to, have the opportunity to prepare that. There's a lot of things, quite honestly, in that zoning ordinance that needs to be changed besides Section 74, but I don't have that leeway to just strike that on my own and start rewriting the ordinance. But Section 74 is a key part of that ordinance. Critical. It's important that we get it right.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith? All right, Mr. Doolittle.
Thank you. Some background of how we got to this point. When I came on board shortly a year and a half ago, I took some comment from a developer and a couple of surveyors about the Planning Commission taking and adding to its workload, approving of things that previously had been administratively approved. And as I dug into and tried to figure out where that seemed to be drawn from, that seemed to be an application of Section 74. So I agree with Mr. Smith. 74 certainly needed some change because it wasn't the 74 that I remembered when I worked here before and helped lead the Planning Commission through the adoption of the zoning ordinance. As far as how it is presented on these pages with regard to margins and numbering and indents, we're going to end up sending this to our code company, and when they put it into our code book, they will have consistency of numbering and margins and sort of some of those things. Yes, I suppose it could be presented a little bit neater here, but it will be taken care of at the time it's codified into the book. They renumber it anyway. Addressing some of Mr. Smith's points. The original intent before, and I think this section of the ordinance has been amended and amended and amended to where it was barely recognizable as to what it originally was intended to be. It was originally intended to be the tool that the Planning Commission would use to conduct public hearings on very limited number of cases. Map amendments, where there were proposals for multiple principal buildings, or when there was a preliminary subdivision. And very often preliminary subdivisions and zone changes could go hand in hand. When you look at the statute and it discusses the Planning Commission hearing proposals for map amendments, this is the language in our ordinance that goes to some extent to describe what that proposal should look like. There has to be a rational way for the Planning Commission to decide whether or not it should change the color on a map. That should be something that is deliberate and considered, and the ordinance proposal goes to some length to describe what those things should be. Section 74 was never intended for the Planning Commission to hear day-to-day cases as regard to what is more commonly referred to among practitioners as site plans. Site plans are those things that when a developer or an owner of a piece of property has the proper zoning, can submit a plan that has the appropriate setbacks, the right number of parking, the stormwater management complete, and is correct with all other respects with regard to zoning, then every city and county I knew or familiar with, that was a ministerial act that was taken care of at the administrative staff level, not a public hearing scheduled before the Planning Commission and the public invited in to comment at a public hearing. And it seems sort of problematic to me because the Planning Commission they don't have the authority to authorize uses that aren't already in the ordinance, nor do they have the authority to alter densities or waive setbacks or any of those things. And so it seems to me, and some of the comment I received from the development community, is that this process takes longer than the city of Paducah and other planning commissions that they're familiar with. That it is somewhat of a unusual thing to see the day-to-day work that could be handled at the staff level being sent to the monthly planning commission meeting. And I'm sorry, Wayne had another meeting and he had to leave, and he said, you know, his point was the reason he didn't like the ordinance being changed is because it removed that comment or that ability for the public to have some input in development. And the use of the development plan, that was never that is how it has become, but that was not the intent. The intent was when there were going to be amendments to the zoning map, that the Planning Commission had a way to do that. We didn't take what I referred to as map amendments that didn't have complete information, that were speculative in nature, that didn't describe where buildings went, where entrances from the roadways would go into the site, where stormwater would be managed. All of these things that we typically hear from the public on that show up at these meetings. They're always interested in stormwater. They're always interested in traffic. They're always interested in what are the location of the buildings. And the proper place for that to happen is when the county is making a decision on should I change this, and it's typically from a residential zone into a commercial zone. Very, very seldom do you see commercial property going back to residential. It's usually somebody's asking for a more intense use of the land than was currently or originally contemplated. So the Planning Commission should be limited just to those three things: map amendments. The ordinance is designed or wants there to be a single principal building on a single lot. Sometimes that doesn't happen, particularly again in commercial properties. We frequently see the reasonable need for there to be more than one principal building on a site. So instead of that, and that can have some implications with the public, so that one was added as well. So all the business related to is this a site plan or a development plan? I think the language became combined and it wasn't intended to be combined. These were intended to be two distinct different actions. Development plans for the limited purposes of zone changes and multiple principal buildings and preliminary subdivisions, if applicable. And all other use by right, ministerial type acts to be done by the staff. I kind of agree with Sonny. I don't like the generic term of county, but the ordinance also does say the judge executive will appoint the administrative personnel for the administration and enforcement of the ordinance as well. So that can be different people at different times. It can sometimes be the county engineer. It can sometimes be the chief building inspector if we're talking about a single family home or a duplex being built, or it can be the zoning administrator if it's a commercial property. The amendment as designed would do this. People would submit a preliminary development plan, and it would have sufficient information on it for the Planning Commission to make a good and considered and wise decision as to whether or not that zone should be very often increased in intensity. But it also includes the provision that very often these things can be preliminary, and that you should be able to not have a public hearing to come back if it is minor. And so the amendment describes things that would be minor in nature so that you would not have to come back and create secondary public hearings for things that had already been approved. That was something, because right now, as the Planning Commission was practicing it, if they approved a development and somebody wanted to reorient the building or change its length relative to its width differently, that would require another stop at the Planning Commission. And that's too timely and difficult for development and sort of unreasonable. So that was the purpose of creating a way for the county staff just to look at minor amendments. Questions for me?
Let me ask you this. Would it make sense to take Sonny's notes and maybe Mr. Doolittle, Mr. Cannon, I know a little bit about zoning from a class I took 25 years ago, maybe. Things could have changed a bit since then. Might have even forgot a little something, I'm not sure, but to take his notes, at least Mr. Cannon, Mr. Doolittle, sit down and go through that and see if we can come to some kind of agreement on the thing. And seems like to me that might be a smart way to proceed.
Yeah, he pointed out a word or two that I'm not sure what they mean or where they came from that do need to be changed. So I'd be happy to do that.
His principle of following the statute word for word, I couldn't agree more on that. I don't want to add more words for an appellate court to look at because we've added an extra word, and now they got to figure out, does improper mean something different than inappropriate? We might really disappoint ourselves 10 years from now if we did that.
I'll make a motion we pass over this.
I don't know that it needs to be passed over, Commissioner. This is just the introduction. We could make amendments to this.
Whatever amendments you make, just keep in mind that as commissioners, I think all three of us and probably the judge and you, Steve, we hear day in and day out on how tough it is to get things done in McCracken County and how long it takes. So whatever you're cleaning up on that, make sure it shortens time instead of it makes it a longer amount of time.
Can I speak to that?
Yes.
Well, there is no delay with the Planning Commission. I don't know what takes place before things come before the Planning Commission, but I assure you, when things come before the Planning Commission, they are there to meet, they decide. If there's a map amendment proposed, a hearing is held, a decision is made, and it's made the same day. So there's no delay on that end of it. And I don't know where the delay is, but
The delay, Mr. Smith, is because the planning commission only meets once a month. We work every day of the week. The staff works every day. The planning commission meets once a month.
well, I think somebody could change that if you felt like that was necessary to speed the thing up. I'm just telling you that it's not the planning commission itself that's the cause of the delay. If it's because they only meet once a month, that's just, you know, I mean, that's something they can't control. So, you know, your people that are serving on the planning commission are very conscientious. They take their job very seriously, and they are in no way interested in delaying any project. The other thing that I would say, and I wish that Mr. Elliott was able to be with us, because I was at that meeting months ago when we had the discussion about those development plans. And we have had a number of development plans that have come before the Planning Commission. And a member of the public, somebody that owns property next to a development, has been at that meeting, and they've raised questions about something. And it's very legitimate questions about stormwater runoff, okay? Because we see these stormwater basins that are proposed in development plans all the time. But what happens when that development basin that's drawn on that piece of paper doesn't in reality work? And we've had instances where neighboring property owners have come to planning commission meetings to express concern over a development that has taken place where a stormwater detention basin is not working. And, you know, so it is a forum for people to come and to be able to express concerns. Not that the planning commission can necessarily force anything to happen, but they at least provide the forum where people can come and address that developer at the meeting and tell them their concerns about what's going on that property. And I think as public servants, that's something that certainly the planning commission is interested in, and that's where that comment came from that Mr. Elliott expressed to Steve prior to the meeting, because there have been several times where that's taken place.
What I'm hearing is that both of you, Mr. Smith and Mr. Doolittle, both agree that there need to be changes. We have this proposal, first reading, or the ordinance, first reading. As Mr. Doolittle said, I think what we can do is go ahead and if you're so inclined, approve the first reading. But before we come back with the second reading, take Mr. Smith's notes, Mr. Doolittle, Mr. Cannon, sit down, go through them, incorporate what they believe would. I think we all want to, you know, streamline things as much as possible, but at the same time, you know, not lose our efficiency or effectiveness in doing things that promotes the goals of the zoning ordinance and the maps and those things. So I would propose that we do this first reading, take a vote on that, see if we agree as to the first reading, and with the understanding that we're going to do some amendments and come back with the second reading, and perhaps we can then agree what the final product would be.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay.
From the first reading to the second reading? Can you talk
Pardon me?
about the ordinance?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I said, can you totally rewrite the ordinance between the first reading and the second reading?
Pretty much.
Sam?
That may,
Sam on that.
yeah, we can, but that's going to be a little bit of maybe a logistical challenge, because when you revamp an ordinance, you can make any changes that are necessary to the ordinance between reading 1 and reading 2. However, those particular changes have to be set out in writing, and there needs to be some sort of a memorialization, whether that be oral. I think an oral discussion would satisfy that requirement, that it discusses things. And it's just like the legislative finding, there has to be a change would be it'd be necessary to have a rational connection between the objective of the particular piece of legislation and what it's going to accomplish, and the decision to amend it in a certain way. So you can do that. We've never completely had an omnibus revamp of an ordinance between reading 1 and 2. It's usually reserved for tweaks of some certain kind rather than a revamp.
In my opinion, this needs a lot more than tweaks. It'd be a pretty bloody mess.
Yeah, I was concerned about basically kind of the confusion or inclusion of one process, preliminary development and map amendment. That seemed concerning.
Steve Doolittle, there's no timing on this. It won't hurt if we pass over it and delay it a couple of weeks, will it?
No.
I think we ought to pass over and get it in the form we want, and then we'll have 2 readings after that, because after we get the next reading, we may need more changes in it. Judge, we entertain a motion to pass over this.
Well, what's going to be what's our procedural ground then? Are we going to need to then re-advertise it?
No.
So I think it goes to extend if it's totally remodeled, and I think it has to be referred back to the Planning Commission. If it's minor in nature, then I don't think it requires a new hearing.
And as a point of order, if the first reading is passed, it does have to be re-advertised, because your advertisement has to give the date of the second reading.
What's that go?
I was just saying, it's not time sensitive. We have an ordinance in place right now. It needs work, but it's not time sensitive. It's not anything that has to be done tomorrow.
I'll make a motion, we pass over this.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of passing over? By pass over, you mean to the next meeting, or just?
Well, until they get the changes made and our deputy judge brings it back to us. And then we determine whether it has to go back to the Planning Commission or not after they make the changes they need to make. I don't know if we need to do a day certain, because I'm not sure that Mr. Doolittle's, I know he's got a lot of stuff going on. He might not be able to put it all together in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
Well, I'll just throw in that my understanding, and I don't, it's been a while since I looked at any of this, 25 years maybe. My understanding is that we're required to have the fact hearing, and then we can decide between the first and the second reading. I think that as long as the second reading does not change the general specifics, I guess the most particular terms, the relevant outcome of the ordinance, that we can do the second reading and enact this. It's a matter of procedure that we have this legislative fact hearing, and then as the fiscal court, we can amend it as we want. But maybe we can come up with an agreement that we would not have to go back. I don't like to. Frankly, I think there's an awful lot of expense in the planning and zoning meetings. I do agree with Mr. Smith. There's good people that are working hard trying to do the right things. But I would like to get this thing streamlined and be able to get this done without having a lot of legal analysis back and forth. We've got 2 people on our county payroll that are both trained in and experienced in zoning, and I think we can rely on them. But that's why I'm going to comment. So, any other discussion?
One thing I need to point out real quick before we move forward on this either way is that in part of my analysis that revealed that before, or at least my interpretation is that before a decision is made to have a first reading, and essentially the point of the legislative finding is to define the legislative facts that will allow the fiscal court to determine a rational connection between the amendment and the betterment of the business of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I believe that to be in strict compliance with the administrative requirements, we would need to have a findings of fact, a delineation of the facts that were found to show that there is a rational connection between the proposed amendment and the goal of effective and efficient operation of planning and zoning activities. And I think that we probably should have that in writing, or at least dictated to later be reduced to writing before we take a vote. Because by taking a vote on the ordinance, I believe that is showing an acquiescence or an approval of that ordinance in that form to be amended subsequently. But however, I think there should be a finding of fact.
So is this actually a hearing on that change?
It's essentially all this would be is this is a hearing to allow Sonny and Steve to present facts to the fiscal court, whereby you guys could filter through, find the legislative facts that are applicable across the board that make, in your mind, this amendment proper. It rationally relates to the betterment of the business. And so we can actually identify them.
Could we procedurally adjourn our hearing and therefore maybe not have to do the re-advertising of the First Amendment, of the first reading of the ordinance?
It'd be essentially like taking it under advisement, and we could reconvene at the next meeting for further discussion if more
That'll
time.
work.
Yeah, and we'll have written findings of fact that support. Yeah, I think what I hear, we all want to do something different than what we're doing. We all think we need to do something different than what we're doing. We just need to polish this up a little bit.
Or a lot.
Or like.
Steve Doolittle, do you think you can have the issues worked out in 2 weeks?
I'm going to be gone for one of those 2 weeks.
Let's set it for the meeting after that then. We'll continue it to the meeting after.
That'd be fine with me.
I'll make that motion, whatever that date is, that we adjourn the hearing and continue it on July, whatever the date is.
I believe it's the 27th.
The 27th of July. That's my motion.
Second.
All right, got the motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, we'll do that.
Excuse me, the motion you just voted on was Commissioner Bartleman's motion to adjourn this issue until July 27th. There is also a motion to pass.
I'll withdraw that motion.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a motion. We take a 10-minute recess because we've got another 45 minutes or better. You've got to wait till we vote, Eddie. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right, let's take 10 minutes.
Judge, do you need me anymore?
No, sir, I think we got now. We'll see you in a month, maybe. How about that?
Thank you. I'll go eat dinner.
Thank you,
All
sir.
right, thank you. Eat something for us.
No, did I?
Oh, the judge is muted.
Commissioner Parker, you there? All right, I think we're all back. We're ready for B, Madam Clerk.
Sir, I believe we're ready for C. It is
All right,
hereby
let's-
ordered. It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 67, that the second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2020-08 shall be conducted in summary format as follows. McCracken County, Kentucky, McCracken County Fiscal Court, ordinance number 2020-08. An ordinance setting and establishing the proposed fiscal year 2020-2021 operating budget for the funding of all McCracken County governmental operations prepared in strict compliance with the mandates of Kentucky Revised Statutes, Chapter 68. Summary: the action taken by the present ordinance is required by Kentucky Revised Statutes, Chapter 68, and is carried out in strict compliance with the same. After detailed investigation by the McCracken County Fiscal Court into each separate activity of the county and necessary funding requirements for the provision of the same, a proposed county budget is now prepared and submitted for approval of the fiscal court, with expenditure allocated to budget units as classified below. General fund, general government, $4,451,210. Protection of persons and property, $1,141,491. General health and sanitation, $436,087. Social services, $50,000. Recreation and culture, $288,829. Airports, $150,000. Bus services, $9,000. General services, $1,104,362. Contingent appropriations, $500,000. Fringe benefits, employer share, $2,007,326 for a total of $10,138,305. Road fund, roads, $2,962,265. Capital projects, $497,150. General services, $2,000. Fringe benefits, employer share, $702,467 for a total of $4,163,882. Jail fund, protection to persons and property, $5,411,505. General services, $11,000. Fringe benefits, employer share, $2,180,823 for a total of $7,603,328. Local Government Economic Assistance Fund, Social Services, $51,075 for a total of $51,075. State Grants Funds, Social Services, $40,000 for a total of $40,000. Federal Grants Funds, Social Services, $90,000 for a total of $90,000. Sheriff Fund, General Government, $3,517,766. General Services, $2,000. Fringe benefits, employer share, $2,046,364 for a total of $5,566,130. Economic Assistance Fund, General Government, $6,000. Contingent appropriations, $10,000 for a total of $16,000. Juvenile Justice Fund, protection to persons and property, $35,000. Contingent appropriations, $10,000. Total, $45,000. Transient room tax distribution, recreation and culture, $2,844,608. Contingent appropriations, $686,712 for a total of $3,531,320. Debt Service Fund, bonds, courthouse, $241,083. Other county liabilities, $2,086,671. General services, $1,100. Contingent appropriations, $10,000 for a total of $2,338,854. Grand total of all funds, $33,583,894. Certification. It is hereby certified by the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate official statement of the main points of and contents of ordinance number 2020-8. Public inspection. Ordinance number 2020-08 shall be available for public inspection in its whole and complete form in the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office during ordinary business hours.
A motion?
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? Everybody good? All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. That carries.
It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 67, the first reading of ordinance number 2020-9 shall be conducted in summary format as follows. McCracken County, Kentucky, McCracken County Fiscal Court, ordinance number 2020-9. An ordinance amending the franchise agreement granted pursuant to ordinance number 2005-10 to extend the term of the franchise. Summary. The action taken by the present ordinance amends ordinance number 92-2, enacted June 8, 1992, and ordinance number 2005-10, authorizing the grant of a non-exclusive cable television franchise. Certification. It is hereby certified by the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate official statement of the main points of and contents of ordinance number 2020-9. Public inspection. A true and correct copy of ordinance number 2020-9 shall be made available for public inspection in its whole and complete form by the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office. Any person desiring to inspect ordinance number 2020-9 shall contact the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office via telephone at 270-444-4707 to make arrangements for the transmission or delivery of the same.
Motion?
So made.
For a second.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
I've got a question, Steve. As we go through the process of renewing this contract over the next few months, will we have a public hearing and will we have some Comcast officials present in case the public has comments about the service?
I don't know how to answer that. I think if we ask for and require that as part of the franchise process, we can certainly make that request. I've had exactly one meeting with Comcast folks, and I think they were from Michigan. So we did it by teleconference, and the telecom attorney we've used to this point is Specialty Telecommunications, a lawyer from Minneapolis. So it's a little hard to get folks in here. However, the franchise and the ordinance does talk about dispute resolution, and those boil down to service issues.
I know. I mean, I hear from time to time we get complaints about the service, and an issue I've talked to you about, Steve, is a resident who they won't give them service. It's going to cost them $8,000 or $9,000, and they're a long route where it's provided. And I just think we need to give people an opportunity to come in and comment if we can do that. I mean,
I think the most common complaint I've heard isn't about bad service; it's about lack of service. That they're not offering it in their area. Our agreement does speak to certain densities that have to occur before they will serve an area. So that's been, people trying to get it and actually want their service and being denied because it's too far out of their footprint or too far off the road.
Yeah, I think we need to deal with that. I mean, they go down through my subdivision, and they run a line, and there's 15 houses, and they only go a short distance, and sometimes you have to eat a little bit to to provide service in one area. I think it's something we need to try to deal with. I hope we can get them down here and deal with that issue to provide service to everybody in the county since they have an exclusive agreement.
To be clear, all this ordinance proposal does is extend the
Right.
current franchise for 6 months during the negotiated period.
Right. But during that next 6 months, I hope we can have some direct input from Comcast and let the public comment. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, that was a no. All right, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Ah,
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 67, the first reading of ordinance number 2020-10 shall be conducted in summary format as follows. McCracken County, Kentucky, McCracken County Fiscal Court, ordinance number 2020-10. An ordinance authorizing and approving the sale of property at 5400 Commerce Drive to KSR Legacy Investment Corp. Pursuant to an option to purchase in conjunction with the City of Paducah with respect to a public project and authorizing the execution of legal documents related thereto. Summary. The action taken by the present ordinance is to authorize the judge executive to execute a deed by and between the City of Paducah, Kentucky and McCracken County, Kentucky as grantors and KSR Legacy or its permitted assignee, if any, as grantee for the purpose of conveying the premises in exchange for payment of the option price of $3,600,000 with a credit on the county's share of the purchase price as provided in an ancillary agreement dated on or about June 9, 2020, and for the execution of any and all other documents necessary to close on said transaction, not inconsistent therewith and not substantially adverse to the county. Certification. It is hereby certified by the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate official statement of the main points of and contents of ordinance number 2020-10, public inspection. A true and correct copy of ordinance number 2020-10 shall be made available for public inspection in its whole or complete form by the McCracken County Judge's Executive's Office. Any person desiring to inspect ordinance number 2020-10 shall contact the McCracken County Judge Executive's Office by telephone at 270-444-4707 to make arrangements for the transmission or delivery of the same.
So moved.
second.
Discussion?
Steve, this doesn't include the loan on the equipment, does it?
It does not.
Right.
This is just the real estate.
What's the status of that? Are they going to pay that off or continue making payments, or do we know?
An inquiry has been made. They had requested lots of information about payoff and that, but I think, and I wish Carrie was here, but I think in the current loan documents, they have the right to do that. It won't require any additional approvals, I don't believe, by us.
But we will get the funds for that when they pay off that equipment.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Or continue to make payments on it. They've
Right.
made every indication about paying it off, but that hasn't happened yet.
Thank you.
You're muted, Eddie. You're muted.
This is our first reading.
Yes, first reading.
And we're going to do this reading. We're going to do the second reading later this week.
No, I think we've picked out the date, and Vicki emailed you earlier about July 8th. I
Right.
believe is the date. The company wanted to get it all done by July 1. That just wasn't possible with us with publication requirements. And what they were trying to do was avoid another month of rent. So we've advised them, we'll just prorate the rent on a daily basis. So we're trying to do it as quickly as we can for them. So if we can have that second reading on the 8th, that would be nice to get that done.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. That gets us to executive session with Bruce. Let me see if I've got my cheat sheet here. We need a motion to go in executive session for the specific proposal business entity where public discussion of the subject matter would jeopardize the local or location retention, expansion, or upgrading of a business entity as permitted by KRS 61.810(1)G. Also, for future sale or acquisition of a specific parcel of real estate as permitted by KRS 61.810(1)B.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. And I'll make a comment that we will not be taking any action when we come back into open session after this executive session, except to move to adjourn. So that will be the end of our meeting tonight. There'll be no other business. So we'll move now into executive session.